A couple of months ago, we had a big talk on sex and relationships. This is possibly an even more difficult subject. We're going to talk about money, which vicars are not wont to do. But I thought, as we're in the middle of our Lent series of meeting God in things, it seemed fitting to ask, how do we meet God in our money, in our spending and saving and earning? I don't know if it's something you think about. I think if we take our faith seriously, then probably we should. Our money and our use of it is intimately connected to who we are. People are often defined as consumers. That's how companies think of us. Is that fair? Are we just consumers? Much of our life necessarily revolves about how much we earn and how we earn it, what we can afford and save and spend, and naturally so. We're not subsistence farmers anymore. So if you want to get stuff, have stuff, you need money to do it. Of course, it's important. Our very existence is connected with having enough money. And not having enough is a source of genuine stress. Feeling like we don't have enough can be a source of created worry. There's a difference, isn't there, between not having enough and feeling like you don't have enough. Where those two things meet is hard to say. But money is fundamental to our life, like it or not. And if our faith is fundamental to our life, then at some point those two things have to intersect. And do they clash or do they harmonize? It is sometimes said that the last part of a person to be converted is their wallet. This is where the rubber hits the road. I think there's some truth in that. It's really interesting being a spiritual leader. It's not necessarily how I think of myself, but that is what vicars are. There are times when I stand here and I share wisdom and discipleship practices that I have worked out, problems I have found solutions to, issues where it's my job to lead by example, where I feel like I am further ahead of you on this, and that's as it should be. I've taken time out, I've been trained, all of that. This is not that. Okay, I am not better at money than you are. And it's important that we explore a few of these things today, but I do not want to stand here like a hypocrite and tell you what you should be doing like I'm any better at it than you are. It's not that. Some of this was hard for me to write, and I need to apply it to myself, so don't go away going, well, if you're not, well, like I'm in this same boat. I am not on top of this. My holiness with my finances is very much a work in progress. The Old Testament, if you're looking through the Old Testament for things to say about money, you'll find some, but more of it is about land, because it was more of a farming culture. That's how you got wealth, was you grew it and you traded it. The passage that we heard from Leviticus, from Eileen, was, if it's from Leviticus, that means it's just after the Exodus, right? Well, from those first 5 books, God's people have got out of slavery in Egypt. They're in the desert with Moses, and he gives them these instructions for, this is how you will live when you get to the land, the promised land. When you get there, live like this. Good set of commandments. And the passage was about the year of Jubilee, which is this sort of super Sabbath. You'll know about the Sabbath. It's in the 10 Commandments. They're written on the front of church. We all know them. And one of those is have a day off. Right? The Jewish practice of taking Saturdays off. God's people are to rest. They, and even their servants, which I always think is quite radical stuff. Your servants, your animals, everybody gets a day off, 1 day a week. The revolutionary concept still behind our weekends. It's a holy gift to us, a weekend. To rest and to trust that everything will keep working, that God is in charge of creation, and to not constantly be grasping to make sure we must work, we must have enough, we must work. Rest. That's the gift. To mark our faith with our lives. Creation is to be enjoyed as God enjoys it, and we're invited into that. And beyond Sabbathing weekly, the people of God were called to rest their fields every 7 years. I don't know how that worked. I'm not a farmer, it's a different sermon. But apparently it's good for your fields to lie fallow, and you just eat whatever has grown naturally. And then after 7 Sabbath years, so 49 years, the next year is this year of Jubilee, this year of the Lord's favor that Jesus refers to in Luke. You might have heard of that. Every tribe in Israel, this was the deal, was supposed to have its own area, and within each tribe's area, every family had its own plot of land. It'd be marked out. This is your bit, that is their bit. We know what's going on. And in this Jubilee year, we were hearing every family gets their own land back. In between, economics happens, as always it did. Some people did better, some people did worse, either through luck or hard work. And you could sell your land to somebody else if you needed to. but only until the next Jubilee year. So if it's 1 year after the last one, you've got 48 years left of it, you get a very good price for your land, and if it's 1 year to go, you get much less for your land. But after 50 years, everybody gets their land back. Like it's reset, okay? Whether or not this actually ever happened is unclear. Quite possibly not. But it sets out the principles that in an ideal world, everybody gets their land back after 50 years. It seems a bit like God has tendencies towards classic communism, right? It's a bit Marxist, that. And it's not actually fair, this sort of justice. This set of people suddenly are getting land back that had been legitimately sold and they haven't earned it. They just get given it back. This set of people whose parents had acquired the land lose their land. But there is a justice, but there's also an unfairness in that. It's interesting. But it's all unfair, really. It's not so much, as Marx might have said, that all property is theft, but more that all property is a gift from God. None of us deserved any of it. And we might want to think about who had been thrown out of the land before the people of God got there. That's interesting. But economics can play out, but no one is to have too much or too little, and no one is supposed to be carrying forward this sort of inherited situation, be that having more or having less. Periodically, it gets reset so there's not inequality carried forward or too pronounced. It's always nice when you find some theological truth that then science can back up and verify. I don't know if you know this, but studies have shown that inequality in wealth is much worse than just low levels of wealth. Countries, parts of the world, companies where the gap between the richest and the poorest is smaller are happier than places where there's a bigger gap. So even if you go to a place where in real terms everybody's not very well off, if they're all about the same level, those people are happier. Whereas if you go somewhere where even the bottom people are quite rich, but the people at the top are very, very rich, there's a sort of resentment that builds in the people at the bottom and a fear that builds in the people at the top. Those Scandinavian high tax practices are good for everybody, it seems. The people at the top are happier being less rich as long as they're not too much richer than the people at the bottom. It's interesting. We don't want too much inequality. It doesn't work. And the World Happiness Survey was out again this week, and I think Finland won. Good on them. But you can see it. It is playing out. As we said, though, this year of Jubilee never probably got enacted. Getting the winners in those ancient economic land trades to give up their winnings in practice instead of theology is hard. We don't actually always want what is good for us. If they'd had science, I'm sure they'd, oh, fine, yeah, sure, no, I see what you're saying about inequality. I'm sure they'd have happily given their land away. We don't hear much about the Jubilee after it was pronounced in Leviticus. What we hear in the rest of the Old Testament is about margins and boundary stones. One of the most repeated commands in the Old Testament is to leave the margins of your field when you're harvesting, not to collect everything you can, to be deliberately inefficient so that the stuff is left behind for people who don't have enough so that they can collect it. It's lovely. It's not a handout. You've still got to do the work, but there's spare everywhere. You can gather the bits from other people's fields, from other people's olive trees, and this was specifically for, it always says, the widow, the orphan, the migrant worker, which is an interesting point to remember when we get into immigration talk these days. Immigrants get a really, well, they've always had a hard deal. The Bible is very clear. Widows or orphans and migrants should be given this stuff. And likewise, we hear about boundary stones. We had these bits that say, my family, your family. Everything was laid out. And God's wrath, we're told, in several places, is really against people who move boundary stones. There's a few passages we could point to, but he gets very angry if people are increasing their wealth. And the real problem with that is, if I've bought some land off Jonathan, we've got a few years to pay out, so that's fine. But while I own it, I just shuffle the boundary stones my direction. When he gets it back, he's got less. You're building in generational inequality if you're moving boundary stones. That's why God's getting really angry. It's tinkering with his justice systems. So many passages we could cite about this, but this was not good. They were not good at this. And the problems with not leaving enough to look after the widows, the orphans, and the migrants, and with not treating each other equally, is the story God's people tell themselves about why they end up in exile. They get to Babylon, they get dragged off, their leaders executed, and their children taken away. Like, why are we here? And God's prophets tell them, you are not good to the widow, the orphan, and the migrant. You might have been worshipping in the temple, but it doesn't count if you're not being good to people with money. What does the Lord require? The prophet Micah asks. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly before your God. So you would think, having been dragged off to exile, that God's people are then great at this when they get back. Absolutely on top of financial inequality systems. No. Hence the gospel reading. Jesus gets into the temple, like church. This is the place it's supposed to be working, and they've got this system where you can go and buy the animal sacrifices you need because you've come a long way. And instead of a fair price for the doves or the sheep or whatever it is that you're going to sacrifice, people are getting ripped off. There's like an exchange system, and the money changers are taking a skim off the top. So poor people are getting stiffed when they're trying to do the right thing for God. And this is what Jesus is very upset about, that there's inequality and injustice right in the place where we're supposed to be doing well. They hadn't learnt, and God incarnate isn't having it. It's justice and money and worship interact with each other. They matter to God. This could easily be another one of those 30-minute sermons that you want to watch on YouTube at 1.5 speeds, where I try and cover a whole massive topic. Or it could be a lecture where I tell you how to do better with your money from somebody who isn't even doing very well with it themselves. I can't do either of those things, but I have to say something. I think I have some useful questions for us all. Thinking about money and our finances is not really about the money and the finances. It never was. It's about justice and generosity and faith. In an ideal world, if we all had enough, we are called to be the people of a kingdom of justice and generosity. That's what Jesus was cross about the temple. To live with our economic self and our spiritual self in harmony and as a blessing to ourselves and those around us. To live with that Sabbath spirit of saying, I can afford to pause. Enough is enough. And not to grasp with every working moment for more. And leaving space to share our enough with other people. To be more relaxed about our finances, to have faith, and leave space for God to be at work. That's the ideal. None of us, I assume, are consciously moving literal boundary stones. Anybody moved a boundary stone recently? We don't do that. We don't live in that sort of a society. But we do need to ask ourselves whether we are complicit in moving metaphorical stones. Are we using our money ethically and with justice? It's not a right or wrong answer. Yes and no, all of the time. Are we buying things that were made by people who were paid a fair wage? And do we know? Have we bothered to check? Sometimes. If a price seems too good to be true, probably it's not true. Right? It's not fair. Are things being flown too far? What's the carbon footprint of your shopping? I'm struggling with this. Should Amazon have as much market share as it does? Shops around the world are disappearing, and Jeff Bezos is in charge of things and bidding for military contacts because he's so very rich and building spaceships, and that scares me a little bit. And yet, if I click things there, they will arrive tomorrow. I have to have a word with myself about Amazon. It would be hard to keep some of the church stuff going without next day delivery. But I would rather there were lots of small local shops staffed by people with jobs, as well as avoiding injustice. Can we spend positively if we have to spend? Sometimes I struggle with this. I like a bargain, but is it better to buy a really good thing that will last and has been well made by people over here, paid a good wage, to repair things, to reuse things? To buy from ethical companies. Do you know what a B Corp is? People can be listed as a sustainable company. And one of the things is that the top people aren't paid more than a certain amount more than the bottom people. So that's a good thing. And they're ethically, the carbon, the environment, the way they treat their staff. Find those. Do you want to put money into local companies? Quite possibly having a haircut and going for lunch at the pub here in Calverley is the Lord's work. I commend it to you. Any pub you like. I don't have favourites, but put money behind the bar. Are we paying people well? If we have anyone to pay, we've had to wrestle with this at PCC. I used to think having a cleaner was an indulgence. We have a cleaner once every couple of weeks. I'm like, ooh, I'm so middle class now. I've got a cleaner and a soda stream. But I don't think it is an indulgence. We're very busy people, and actually somebody else is getting paid a good wage to do a thing that they enjoy doing. Like, it keeps the money moving around. It's important that people have jobs. That's fine, I think. Are we committed to people being paid properly, though? That might mean paying more for other things. I don't want to find myself on a holiday and realise that the people where I am are being paid less than a minimum wage. I can't quite bring myself to go on a cruise, having read about what people are paid in the different levels on a ship. But I'm not sure I want to pay well enough that everybody's earning. Oh, it's complicated. Do you know what I mean? It might affect how we look at things, making sure everybody's paid well and looking past a bargain. I want to live with a spirit of generosity and abundance, but not recklessness. To follow that Sabbath principle. And I'm aware that I am very privileged. Not that vicars are paid well, I'm married well. But it is awful that not everybody has to make these decisions or can make these decisions. It is awful that we've set society up in such a way that too many people cannot easily make ends meet. There is more than enough to go around, I think. And we don't all have a fair share or fair access to making a share. One of the church's jobs is to lament that and to stand up against injustice, to call it out, to cry out, to stay informed, to read about problems, not to shirk away from them, to vote better, not to vote for what's good for you, but what's good for all of us. To partner with folks like the Food Bank, who are making a difference. They help individuals, but the Trussell Trust people are really good, say, at lobbying government. So we've got to connect with charities that are trying to make a difference to individuals and to systems. So like the Food Bank, Shelter are really good, that sort of thing. To act in ways that aren't making things worse internationally. So thinking about carbon, thinking about wars. Sometimes we're called to practically help, and the vicars, I have a fund. We're trying to get access to it, but I do have a vicars fund. I can help people out individually if you're stuck. It's all part of our call to live generously, even occasionally uncomfortably when we can afford it, to make a difference on whichever issues it is that's on your heart. There's lots of good charities. We should all have one or two that we favour. One of those charities is this church. This is the sort of practical bit. Giving is really good for you. I would be really pleased if everybody came to the church, started giving lots of their money away. All the local charities would be doing well. I couldn't be happier. And it would be good for you to be living generously. But I would hope that you think this is a charity that is good for all of us, that this is a place that blesses Calverley. Keeping this church going has been a blessing for 870 years now. And, as we said, we give a lot of our money to the diocese so that other churches can keep going that are not as well off as us, so that we've got a safeguarding team that helps when we get stuck, that sort of thing. It's really important. We covered some of this with Margaret earlier, but this church has been here for nearly 900 years. I would like to think it will still be here in another few generations. So we are required to keep it going, to keep it warm, to keep it well staffed with good people. Let us hand it on well and bless the work that it does. Church of England guidance is, if you're a faithful Christian, if you're taking your discipleship seriously, some of us are, some of us are not, then give 10% of your income away is what they recommend. Half of that to charities of your choice, half of it to the church. If we were all doing that, just think of the good that would be getting done by charities around Calverley and that we could be getting done here. Your giving is the vast majority of our income. And if you're not ready for that, it's fine. Margaret and I can tell you stories of the time before we started giving regularly, where we would just turn up and give money. Wherever you are on your giving journey is fine. We would rather you were doing it regularly so we can budget, and also we get 25% extra back. So have a word with her, and that would be a huge blessing to us. Do consider whether you could. But I hope you value what you've got here. One of the other things that Margaret and I talked about is when you start giving to a church, it feels like yours. You've got a say in it. You've got a stake in it. So our tax efficient and anonymous parish giving scheme will give you a sense of belonging here. It'd be good for you. Ultimately, our money and how we treat it and think about it is changing us. It is making a difference to you, and it is making a difference to the world. How do we think about it? It can be quite difficult to ask ourselves questions about this, to spot where we've bought the lie about buying our way and spending our way to happiness. I have to keep putting that one down, because it is a lie. It isn't really what we're for. We aren't consumers. I'm not sure how modern how much modern British culture helps. I'm slightly envious of these Scandinavian countries. I keep reading books about it. They have this word in Swedish called lagom, means enough. But it's not just enough. It's this celebration of sufficiency, of not pushing for excess. It's about moderation and sustainability and contentment. I would love for that to be the sort of thing that was cherished in this country. It sounds a lot like our call as Christians to be beacons of hope and pointers to a better way with our approach to stuff, to cherish lagom, enough. I don't know how we get into asking ourselves questions about what is enough. Sometimes hypothetically. Every now and then, I'll be at a party, we'll go, what would you do if you won the lottery? What would you do if you suddenly had £10 million? Have you had that conversation? What would you do with it? If somebody gave you £10 million, I think we can all agree you don't need all of that money, right? You can give some of it away. How much would you give away? How much would you keep? What is enough? How much is it okay for you to spend on having a nice house or a nice car? I don't know. Is there an okay number? How nice a holiday is it allowed to have before you feel like that's probably a bit much? I shouldn't do that. How much can you spend on one bottle of wine without that being wrong? Or one Lego set? Should the people who work for Bentley and Porsche have jobs? Well, in which case people need to buy their cars. Is that allowed? Is there an ethic to buying those things? Stuff costs money to make. People who deliver services deserve to get paid. I think starting hypothetically, you can ask yourself, what is enough? What are you comfortable with? It's all very complicated. There isn't one answer. I think the least we can do, wherever you are with your faith, is to start asking the questions of yourself. Asking it of other people is not helpful. Don't do that. How much wealth have we got compared to other people? How did we get it? Is it fair? And are we prepared to do something about that? It's very uncomfortable. But maybe we should be a little uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable asking this as a white British person. I watched Small Island a couple of weeks ago at the Playhouse, and I've been watching and reading a bit more about the practices of the British Empire. And while I accept that it is not the case that all white people are rich and everyone else is not, obviously that's not true. I started on a rung several up the ladder from most people in the countries that this country used to own. It's not fair. There are people walking around who are descended from slaves who had the Church of England logo branded onto them. We owned slaves in the Caribbean. What are we supposed to do about that as the beneficiaries of the wealth that was made by those people? I don't know. That stuff isn't my fault. I don't know what my responsibility is for it, but it's not nothing, because those boundary stones have been moved and it's not right and fair, and we should be doing something that makes it better. The deck is stacked unfairly. We haven't even talked today about how much tax you pay, what's a fair pension? What should we be salting away so that we're not a burden to people, but how much is too much? Oh, I don't know. I don't even know how to write that sermon. What are we saving? What do we do about inheritance? It isn't fair that Amelia's going to acquire things from me and Victoria. Some of her friends are not going to acquire from their parents. That's not fair, right? But I would like to give her some things. What do you do about inheritance? I hope you have questions about this, that there's stuff you would like to work out. If you can bring yourself to, write your questions and put them in the Ask Me Anything box. And if I can bring myself to, I will try and answer them. It's complicated stuff. Wherever you are with faith, these are good things to think about. How do we meet God in our money? I think we open ourselves to a bit of sacrifice and selflessness and discomfort. How can we not? It's Passion Sunday. It's 2 weeks before Easter. We look at the terrible cost that Jesus was prepared to pay, was required to pay to set us free. We see what's going on in the world. A little bit of discomfort is the least we can do. Let us pay attention to our money. Let us seek to live and spend and give with generosity and justice. I think those are two good principles. Let us dare to ask ourselves deep questions about how well we're doing at living like that. I think that is the beginning of discipleship hitting our wallets. Our money is changing the world. Let it change it for the better. Our money is changing us. Let it change us for the better. Let us let God use it to change us, to increase generosity and justice. Amen.